So our next talk is from Pablo Calderón. And Pablo Calderón has a very interesting project about social innovation. He has different projects that he will talk to you about. And these different projects, he rather take a perspective on human-centered design for urban living. And I guess he's going to give you a good surprise, but just to let you know, it's about the power of walking. Welcome.
I can do it like this as well. Is it okay? Listen. Listen to me. I am a designer general, and in general, a designer. I give the world the beauty of useful things. I am paid so that you can live in beauty, in comfort, in function, in color, and in joy. I am, together with you, in search of the balance and harmony between the artistic beauty and the natural beauty. I organize the city, the countryside, the landscape, the streets, the buildings and houses, the rooms, the toilets, the kitchens, the tables and chairs, the forks, the plates, the food, ideas, taste, thoughts, culture. I design all of it. As a designer, I love nature, and I will fight till the last of my breath to defend the blue of the sky and the ocean, the green of the pastures, the white of the snow, the red of the sunset. And in doing so, I defend you, men and women, because you too are nature, and live nourishing yourselves from the tasty fruits of the gardens, from the milk of the lazy cows inhabiting the fresh pastures. Make way for the designer. Leave technology to me, as I know how to make it useful, not harmful. Trust me your problems, and I will solve them. Me alone, and don't trust anybody else. So that was not a text of myself or a speech of myself or something that I would believe in reality. This is, in fact, a kind of reenactment of a performance that this guy, who kind of looks like myself as well, Michele de Lucchi, he's an Italian designer from the radical design movement of the 70s, and he did this performance called Designer in Generale, and was trying to poke fun, but also criticize the role that architects, designers, and urbanists had in society till that moment. This, for me, represents also a kind of good introduction to what I'm going to speak to you today. It's funny because like all the different inspirational speakers, they're assigned to one track, while mine is social innovation, which is no track. So I think it represents also quite well what I can speak to you, that it's about everything and nothing at the same time. It might sound very shallow or not, depending on how you see it. And I would like to, before continuing, showing you a small excerpt of another Italian designer, in this case more architect and urbanist, Giancarlo Di Carlo. In 1954, he did this brilliant film called Una lezione It's okay, we get cozy here. Una lezione d'urbanistica, a lesson in urbanism. And it's a brilliant film where he's showing the role of the architect, urbanist, professor in architecture as this kind of god that is managing everything from above. Like you see there, the architect kind of arranging the city from above, seeing the city as just a kind of as a plan or as a map that just has to be arranged from his ideas of beauty, functionality, and so on. Later in the film, you see how he's trying to fit men into his own designs, but men, well, the man that he's trying to fit into those designs, he doesn't fit into those designs, and he's in fact kind of puzzled by that. So this is, let's say, the base of what I want to tell to you. Podemos poner la luz otra vez. And it's basically the difference between dealing with the city, the countryside, the house, anything you want, from a like distant looking scale, that you're looking things from above and you're just arranging them from your own perspectives and preconceptions, prejudices as well. And that would be the example of like a map like this. If you start to, and I guess in the process that you're working, you would also have to confront yourself to working in a scale that is distant from reality, from the streets, and that would be like getting a map of Bogota or of Colombia or wherever you're going to base your projects, and just working on it abstractly. And it would be different to working it on a human scale. And that's why I say I'd rather walk. I'd rather walk rather than be in this kind of ivory tower or working from a distance, and I'd rather walk and see things from a more human scale. And if you walk, you would see things in a different way, and you would see how, for instance, the situationist movement, Guy Debord, he made this map of Paris. So you see how this map of Paris is very different to this map of Paris, because this is more about the affective feelings of the people, of the inhabitants of the city, in the city itself. So this is the kind of engagements that I want to have, and that I want to challenge you also to think in your own ideas and projects. But you can also think of a different idea of mapping or perceiving space, and this is a snapshot of a film of Dutch photographer called Ed van der Elsken, and he did this beautiful film called My Amsterdam, where he's going around Amsterdam just filming the everyday life of the people and talking to people in their normality. So this, you get a very different feel of what a city is, a context is, a neighborhood, a community, a problem when you're walking the city. So I'm gonna show you a different series of projects that I've worked on in different cities and countries around the world. And that I see them as, that I've engaged in this kind of issues, and I've worked on them in this kind of way, or in this kind of approach, thanks to walking the city in different ways. So the first project I want to talk to you about is a project called L'Or Noir. This means like the black gold. And this was in 2012 when we were invited together with my classmates in the Design Academy of Eindhoven to work on a neighborhood in Liège called Saint-Gilles. And this was a neighborhood that was kind of having a lot of problems. People were moving out. There were a lot of people doing drugs in the streets, and it was becoming like more difficult to be inhabited for the people that had inhabited this neighborhood for a long time. And when we were there, the first, let's say, assignment that we had was just walk in the neighborhood and find a local partner. This was a bit forced, of course, like find a local partner. But I started to walk around the neighborhood and see like all the closed down shops, a lot of squatted buildings. Not that squatted buildings are bad per se, but in this case it was kind of generating a kind of bad feel, because it was not like squatters that were like bringing a creative feel to the city, but where people that were more just doing drugs. So I was walking, and in walking, I stumbled into like the local chocolate shop, and I had just arrived in Europe. I was there in Belgium, and I was like, well, what's more famous in Belgium than chocolate? And then I immediately like thought like this could be the place that could be the center or the source of rethinking and reimagining the local value of the neighborhood. So I went inside the shop, and I introduced myself to this wonderful woman, Eliane, was the chocolatier. I don't say it just because she's a chocolate maker. She was really like sweet and special to me. And I introduced myself with my really lousy French by then. Now it's a bit less lousy, but still lousy. And I said, like, hi, I'm a Colombian designer, and I would like to have your chocolate shop be the source of value of the reimagination of this neighborhood. So I want to make like of this chocolate shop a bank. And she was like, oh yeah, that's, she was kind of triggered by that, and she said like, yeah, well, you know, the Aztecs, they used the cocoa beans as a kind of a currency, so it could be like reimagining that through those kind of acts. And that kind of opened space and open room for a really long conversation that we had. And we started to have this epistolary conversation. So I started to send her letters written in typewriter with some kind of excerpts or prints or pictures of some of what were my ideas. And I was saying, like, I want to do this. And then she would send me back a letter with a package of chocolates, of course. And then I got also inspiration from my own country. So everybody, like here in Colombia, they recognize that. That's the chocolatina jet. And it's very beautiful because, I mean, the chocolate, well, now that you try the Belgian chocolate, you realize that chocolatina jet is quite, I'm sorry to say this, is not the best chocolate there is. But you don't buy it for the chocolate. At least I didn't buy it for the chocolate. I bought it for the sticker, for the, how you call that? La lámina. I would buy it for that, and it's because there is a story behind it. So that made me think, like, okay, what if we use this kind of idea of using the chocolate just as a vehicle to valorize the local stories? And that's why in each of the projects that I'm gonna try to talk to you about, there is like a kind of small learning, let's say, that I had, or like a kind of message, moral that there is of the project. And in this one is how to valorize local stories. So I went around the neighborhood, speaking to different people and trying to collect local stories. Also historical facts that people didn't know and so on. And at the end, we produced this. This is the closest I've gotten in my, in my short career of designing an actual product. And this was an actual product that was sold in the actual chocolate shop. So we made this chocolate with the shape of the neighborhood. But more importantly, behind the chocolate, there was like a kind of journal, like a fanzine. And this fanzine had all the stories that I had collected in the neighborhood. So the idea was to kind of use means of distributing the most efficiently, that is chocolate, and in a very daily life element like the chocolatier, the chocolate shop, to kind of like a Trojan horse, start fitting in and sending the stories to the different people so that they would understand the value of their neighborhood. This was a very interesting process because it was actually sold in the chocolate shop, then it was exhibited in a biennial that took place in Liège. And then I kind of forgot about the project, but then 2 years after, I received an email by a woman from the community, and she said like, oh, hi Pablo, I'm more like in French with a very bad English, but I'm Mari from Liège, and I want to tell you that I went the other day to the chocolate shop to France, to Elians, and I bought this small chocolate with the shape of the neighborhood, and it had this story. And the story it was about a pilgrimage, le pèlerinage des musiciens, a pilgrimage of musicians that a group of musicians used to do through all the main street of the neighborhood. She said, this hasn't happened in 400 years, but I want to do it again. So I would like to invite you because, like, in a way, the chocolate was what kind of triggered us to do it. So I went, and there were like more or less 80 people going through to the street, trying to appropriate the space in a different way. So this was very nice also to see how, like, sometimes when you let go of a project, it can also have a life of its own. It's like when you let go the wheel, like it kind of drives on its own. And then it also led to do another project, another iteration of this project, and we were asked, together with my wife, to go do a workshop in this place to produce a new fanzine, but in this case to imagine the future of the neighborhood. So we produced this together in a workshop with a few neighbors, and we after made this new journal depicting the future of the neighborhood. So let's say all the different projects that I'm gonna show you, I think they can be valuable for this stage that you're working on. I mean, I'm not so much into working onto steps and methods, very rigid things, but it can serve as inspiration as to how to ideate, prototype, and test, because this is like different levels of what I've been doing in the different projects. The other project in which, for me, the moral is to listen and give voice to others was my graduation project from the Design Academy Eindhoven, from my social design masters. And I wanted to basically produce a series of interventions to break a deadlock that I identified. The deadlock was best summarized by the Catalonian sociologist Castells, I don't remember his name, but his last name is Castells. Manuel Castells, that's what I know. And he said the problem is not that we don't accept capitalism because we like it. We accept capitalism because we think there is no other way around. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of deadlock that he was presenting, and I said, like, okay, how can I produce a series of actions or interventions to try to break that deadlock? I'm not saying I'm going to change the world. I just want to say like, if I can speak to 10 people, 20 people that can open up their imagination and break this deadlock, that would be enough for me. So I wanted to enter in the public space, as I consider like the place where you can most discuss and question and challenge these kind of notions, through what I thought the most daily life and quotidian element, that is the market. And in that, I inspired, of course, in kind of informal markets of everywhere around the world, also in Bogota. And I went to the workshop to do in one afternoon this cart. So it was basically an informal market to trade products and services with people on the street. But instead of asking them for money, I would ask them for dialogue. So it was just a way to spark conversations and dialogues in the street. So I started to go. The first time I went in front of McDonald's and I made like handmade hamburgers, and I said like, I sell people hamburgers, but instead of giving me money, they have to give me like their opinions and ideas on value and money. And this, I chose it because I had like a kind of personal grudge with McDonald's. I mean, we haven't gone in like 20 years. And it was amazing what people had to say. So I said like, we think that people don't know what the problems are. We think, yeah, but people don't know what's wrong with their community. People don't know, or then the big issues, you know, economy. I know we cannot ask people because people don't know. We make these generalizations. So I realized that's not true. The most normal, everyday person, like they know, they have their own opinions, and it's valuable. So I tried to use this as a kind of vehicle to make those voices and those opinions more visible. I did this for several weeks, for a few months, in fact. I used it also as a vehicle to discuss about what I thought were relevant issues. So, for instance, 1 week after there was the disaster of the, calling it a disaster is a bit problematic, but when the building in Bangladesh collapsed and it killed 1,000 workers, so I wanted to discuss about this, about labor, and of course I went in front of the shops that sold the clothes that were made in that place. So I went in front of Primark, in front of C&A, and I went to sell second-hand clothes that I collected from my colleagues. We also did it with services, so I got some people that were, some of my friends that were like so enthusiastic about cutting hair, so they were like, oh, we're gonna cut hair in the street, and we're like, great, come and do it. And then when we were, that day we were cutting hair in the street, or we were not, I was getting my hair cut, in fact. There was this woman that you see here, she approached us and she said like, but what are you doing? We're like, well, we're cutting hair. She's like, yeah, but why? Well, because we want to use it as a kind of excuse to have a conversation with people and discuss about the right to use the public property and who has the right to use it in their own benefit. And then we say like, but why do you care? And she's like, well, because I am a hairdresser and I have a hair salon here in the corner. And we were like, well, I was a bit ashamed, because like, oh, I'm sorry, like we didn't want to like take out your customers or anything. She's like, no, there's no problem. I love this. I was like, oh, great. Do you want to join? So then she was with her baby in a stroller. She went to leave her baby, I hope in a safe place. And then she came back with all her tools, and she started to cut hair for free. And then she was saying like, I love this because I don't get this in my hair salon. I don't get this kind of diversity. I don't get this kind of conversations. I don't get this kind of situations where you have to go in a place and you have to pay a normal fee, and it's all normalized by like kind of protocol that we have. So that was really nice because like it made me understand that you can challenge also people in different levels, also things that you don't expect, and that's also fine. Like, I mean, maybe if some of my students are here, they're gonna take my words for granted and then they're gonna put them in. But sometimes like the best things happen without wanting, and also without intention, and you don't have to plan it. And you say like, I plan to do this, and then it happened. I would like my student to say like, I tried to do this and it didn't work, but it happened this other thing. Great, fantastic. It's not about intent. There is some people that say like, yeah, difference between art and design is that design is about intent. Personally, I don't believe that. We can discuss that, of course. And then we had, for instance, this frequent customer that he came almost every week to speak with us, and he was like a hooligan of Eindhoven, of the PSV. And it was very interesting to speak with him, because, well, to try to communicate with him, because he was always drunk, and I didn't speak much Dutch by then. And then I started to produce, based on all these interventions, I started to produce a series of media to what I call like amplify the voices of these different people in the street, like to try to make public this collective intelligentsia. So I made, for instance, a series of posters with acetone transfer, and I also glued them around the street. So it was kind of trying to bring back these kind of snippets of what I thought was kind of street wisdom, streetwise, back into the street. I got them from the street, I put them back in the street. So like you can see that there were like very interesting opinions from people. Like there was this guy saying, I would leave my bike unlocked if I know that someone would take it only if he or she needs it. It was a question about like your private or public property. Also what Christian was speaking yesterday about their bike that they designed for discussing about public or private property. Or this one about money, that he said people are tired, they are fed up with the system. The problem is that they do not know any idea of how it could be, and that's also what I told about Manuel Castells. So it kind of gave me a lot of hope of how can we kind of use this kind of collective intelligentsia to build further on these ideas. I also produced a series of fanzines, and I made a toolkit. So it was an idea to kind of summarize the principles and values of the project, so that if anybody else could find it as a kind of relevant or pertinent way of opening up conversations, of doing actions that could lead to design or could be seen as a design process itself, that they could do it. But of course, I did it at the beginning saying like, oh yeah, people everywhere around the world are going to start doing it, and we're going to have like a kind of network of other markets. And of course, that didn't happen. But a few months after, when I was in fact ready to present my project in the graduation show of the Design Academy, I saw that there were a lot of entries in the blog of the other market from a language that I didn't understand anything, and I said like, this has to be Hungarian. So Hungarian is really like, I think is one of the only, like with Finnish, I think is two of the only languages that don't have anything in common with any of the other languages around. So I said like, this must be Hungarian. So I asked to a Hungarian friend like, what is this? And they said like, well, they actually did the other market. They took the toolkit and they did an action first in the University of Applied Arts of Budapest. And then I got in touch with them, and I said like, hey, it's nice that you're doing this. Maybe can you send me the excerpts of the conversations, because that was my interest. And they sent me, and then they tell me like, we're gonna do another one in Budapest. Would you wanna come? And I was like, yeah, I would love to, but I can't. But just send me everything that you can. So this is when they did it the second time in the streets of Budapest, and they used it as a tool to try to discuss about the possibilities of rethinking urban space. So they were using it as a tool to make conversations, to engage people in also, they had, yeah, I don't have the picture, but they had like a kind of wall where also they invited people to collaborate on different ideas of how to rethink the urban space of Budapest and so on. Then when I had to present or exhibit the project, I don't know if any of you has heard about the Design Academy of Eindhoven, but it has a long tradition like in industrial design and very aestheticized art design. So when the graduation show arrived, they said like, okay, well, we want to put a small pedestal and we want to put your cart there. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of ugly. Like, I mean, I did it in an afternoon. It's really badly welded. It's everything was really ugly. So I said like, well, it's not my interest. So I would rather, I would have an empty blackboard, which I would be filling progressively during the week of the exhibition. And instead, I would be in the streets trying to do more actions with the dispositif, with the cart. So in the gallery space, I just had this blackboard, as I was telling you, and then every day when I arrived from the streets, when I was doing some kind of actions or interventions, I would come back, I would discuss it with this girl who I was collaborating with, Anastasia Kubrak, and then we would represent it together, but she was representing it herself. She was the good one in this kind of representation, and then we just produced this kind of stop motion of all the week, trying to show how the most valuable thing of the project was not the card itself as an element, although it helped as a conversation piece, but it was the network that we were building, the people that we were speaking to, the topics that we were speaking. So in every, let's say, branch of the map, there was the topic that we were speaking about, there were the amount of customers that we had, the collaborators, and the two main quotes, according to myself, of course. So it's also about how to valorize what you do. Try to find the proper language to do so. This is a really small project. Right? Calling it a project is a bit of an overstatement, but anyway, it's called A Chair's Worth. Basically, I was invited when I was still living in the Netherlands to Amsterdam. They had this exhibition called Freezing Favela, which was really problematic for its name and for its topic. But anyway, there was a workshop of Latin American designers. We had this kind of gang or group called Latin Power, like you would say power, but Power. And they said like, oh, we're going to do a workshop in which we're going to redesign chairs, and the resulting chairs, we're going to auction them, and that's going to go for charity. It all sounded really beautiful. I'm like, oh, great. So we went there, but I had a problem with designing a chair because, I don't know, as you can see by the couple of projects that I've shown you, like, I'm not quite prone of designing a chair in the traditional sense, let's say. So I arrived there and I said like, okay, but instead of just redesigning a chair and changing bits and bolts and maybe painting another color, I want to take the best, the chair that is in best state, and I want to use it to try to go to barter it in the street, trueque. So I said like, I want to see if like the guy that did the little red paperclip experiment, that he changed a little red paperclip into a house in a lot of iterations. But I said like, let's say, what can I get for this chair? So let's see what, at the end of the day, what my chair will be. It might be nothing, it might be not nobody listens to me, but let's test it out. So I took it, I fixed it a bit, and I went to the neighborhood where we were working. So I was trying to go more to the street, also engage in the context we were located, instead of staying in their own studio and just doing what you feel could be funny or nice or whatnot. And I decided to go to the neighborhood. So the first guy gave me a bike. It's, I mean, you could think that I was kind of robbing him, or I was scamming him, but in fact he saw it the opposite. He said like, look, we always have meetings, parties, reunions in this house, and we always miss one chair. So this chair in this moment is very valuable for us. And at the same time, as a normal Dutch kind of wealthy house has like 15 bikes in the back of the house, just with a flat tire. So he said, like, in fact, I'm scamming you at this moment. So like, okay, great. So a lot of people are saying, like, just stop now and go with your bike and just, you know, forget about the workshop. But I said, no, for the love of whatever this is, I'm going to do it. So I went with the bike trying to change it, which was difficult because people thought I had stolen it. And especially because I didn't speak Dutch, I was speaking with this Latino accent. Did you know how to, did you want to? And the people were like, no, running away, okay. But then, finally, I saw this guy that I told him, and then he said, like, are you for real? And yeah, and his eyes went like really shiny, and then he's like, yeah, I'm gonna look for something that I consider is the same value, and he went up to his house, and he came out with these weights for doing fitness for the ankles. Why not? Yeah, I was not to judge what was. I was just giving people the agency to assign the value that they thought was relevant. Then that was difficult to give away as well, not because it was too valuable, but because nobody cared about that. But then I saw this girl like running, and I was like, these are the girls, and I'm like, yeah, I looked like an insurance salesman. I was like selling everything, like, hey, I know what you need, but, and then. I told them, like, yeah, you could use this, and then they gave me this chain for the tires for the snow, for the winter, which was the middle of the summer, so it was exactly no value at all, so voila. But then I was also having trouble of exchanging that, but then I saw this girl working in her office, and then I said, like, hey, if you're thinking of traveling in the winter, I have something for you, and then I showed the chains, and then she said, like, well, yeah, in fact, we have this paper shredder that is in fact new, that we've had here for like 2 years, and we haven't used it, so you can have it. So at the end, my time was over, and that was my chair. I mean, my chair, and I could sit in it. So people say, like, oh, yeah, so funny, but you cannot sit in it. And I was like, you can sit in it. So I sat on my chair, and I don't know if they sold it, for how much they sold it. Maybe they sold it as a kind of art piece and like, conceptual art piece, whatever. But I think for me, the important learning about this is to understand things as their relations. Not only like that the relations help make the things, or so, things are the relations. And in this case, the chair is also made out of the different relations and the kind of different steps that it had. So I really like to believe it like that. And it was a really silly, like, one afternoon project, but I like to tell the story about it. Another project that was framed within a project of social innovation, that's maybe the only time that you're going to hear me speak about social innovation explicitly, sorry, Andrea, is about this project called, La Voie de Tracenster is how I named the project, but it was a project in Serein, a city next to Liège, in Belgium as well. And they invited 4 designers to work on this social innovation project to try to do a similar process as we did in Saint-Gilles, the first project that I showed you. So try to see how we could like foster or dynamize the change or the improvement of a neighborhood that was really run down. But even in Colombian standards, you would be also scared in this neighborhood. It was really dodgy. Like you could see people like doing heroin in corners. I mean, it was rough. So we were invited a week in January and a week in May, and say like these 2 weeks you have to do something in these 2 weeks to improve this neighborhood. And for me that was problematic because it was a bit too pretentious to think that in 2 weeks you're gonna change something in a city. But I saw it more as an experiment of, by being here, how can we dynamize or activate some different things of the community. So in the first week we were supposed to just analyze, research, investigate the context. But I said like, well, for me that's too, I don't know, I always have, even if I have this kind of, idea of conceptualizing what Christian was saying yesterday around design, I still have this kind of impulse to act, to do something, and to have like immediate results, to test, to show, to make things public. So I said, look, and we use also like you do in design thinking, a lot of post-its and so on. So I said, instead of just researching in this first week. I want to do something that already materializes what is going through my mind while I see this place. So I saw that it was a place that, it was not only very run down, because the main industry of the neighborhood, called ArcelorMittal, metal manufacturer, they had left, and they had left the neighborhood in ruins. But I felt that beyond the kind of physical infrastructural problems of the city was also the image of the city and the neighborhood, of Serein in general and Trassenster in particular. Whenever I told somebody from Liège, come and visit us, we're doing this project, and they were like, in Trassenster, no, we don't even stop when we're going in the car, we don't even stop in the red lights. So I realized that there was like this kind of problem of how people perceived it. So I decided to use those short days to see how we could like start activating a different thinking about and a different perception about the neighborhood. So I went just very quickly in an afternoon to the different shops and to different passers-by, and I said like, okay, if you could imagine a new slogan for Trassenster, what would it be? And it would be just like to rebrand it. And it's influenced by this project that there is here in Casa B in Belén. They have a project called Marca Comunidad, and it's how to apply branding to communities. And it's more about, of course, identity. It's not about selling. It's about identity. It's about people feeling proud of where they're from. So I just went around and collected the slogans. And then I translated these slogans into, I always carried with me a kind of set of stencils, because I see it as a kind of easy way to like pass things to represent things and ideas in a nice way. And I just did all these posters, and the idea was to go around the neighborhood with these posters, together with some members of the community, and paste it in different places of the community, like to just, especially the places that people perceived as most problematic and so on. And I also did some flags, because I also felt that it was a strong like identification element. Like, we always have like my wife made me realize, we always have the Colombian flag next to it, and the flag of the Tadeo. So, but it's a strong identification element. How can we use it also in a more local and, let's say, positive way? So we did this kind of, I call it a procession, together with some people, members of the community, until we identified the place that they consider most problematic of the neighborhood. So we arrived at this kind of dead end of a street that was really like smelling really horrible, like you cannot imagine the whole amount of things that they did there. And we glued the posters and went with all these members of the community. Then after, when I returned, this kid was so, he got so, because I gifted him that flag that said Ugré, un ville qui renaît. Ugré is the other name that they gave to the neighborhood. A ville that is a city that is reborn. And he still kept the flag in the entry of his house, and he was kind of motivated to do something for his city. So when we returned, he was like, "Oh, let me know when you're there, so I can go and work in whatever you're gonna work." I'm not gonna tell you about how it evolved. I just wanted to tell you about this first visit that we did, and how kind of I made a kind of very immediate outcome or product out of it. Yeah, I'm gonna show you this, and I see they're looking at me like, you have to. No, because I know you're taking care of time. I heard Thomas the first day saying like, I'm very strict with time, and that's the key to innovation and so on. So maybe that's why I'm not so innovative, I think, because I'm really like, I can keep speaking for 2 hours. So another is called Roots Through the Roots. This was in Taipei, and for me this message is key. I would like you to keep it in mind after when I tell you what I did. And it's instrumentalize yourself, not the others. There is a lot of other morals or messages that you can take out of this project, but this for me is very important, because I was invited to Taipei, to the World Design Capital in 2015 to do a designer exchange. So then I was supposed to go 2 weeks, and then When I came there, they say like, oh, you're a social designer, you're gonna fix some of our problems. They say like, oh, we have this problem. We have this area of Taipei called Wanhua. Wanhua is the historic district of Taipei, where most of the kind of heritage of the city lies. But it's kind of run down by it's full of homeless, prostitutes, thieves, small mafia even. So it's like, how can you work with this area? I think they were expecting something very practical, that I would say like, oh, I'm gonna design this thing for like homeless to like sleep on, or like a kind of food so they can protect from. But I said like, for me it's too irresponsible to be here 2 weeks and to try to propose something for fixing these issues that for me are very serious, are very political, and require a very deep engagement and also an interdisciplinary working. So I said, during the whole week, I'd rather just meet people. The first week, I said, like, I would just want to meet people. Just take me around, meet organizations that are working different initiatives. I want to meet people and see what they're doing. And maybe at the end, I won't do anything, because I say, like, it's not responsible for me to do anything. So I just went with a translator, of course, and I went, for instance, I met this initiative called Homeless Taipei, no, Hidden Taipei, sorry, and it's homeless people that have been trained to be tour guides in the city, and now they give tour guides where they combine historical elements of the city, but also their personal experience of the public space. So, like, for instance, this guy who people call him Popeye because he was similar to Popeye, his face. He was telling some historical things, but then he would go and say, here, once we were kicked out very violently by the police, and we were like, and a person was killed, and so on. So it was very strong and very powerful. So I realized about the importance of walking, and that's maybe where I'll connect what Camila kind of promised that I would speak about, that I haven't. Well, all these have been a way of walking, and before showing you what I did at the end, I want to read you a small excerpt of Michele de Lucchi, The Practice of Everyday Life, a beautiful book, and in it he has a chapter, kind of excerpt called Walking the City, and walking the city as a tactic to subvert the kind of strategies imposed from power, from above. And he says, the ordinary practitioners of the city live down below the thresholds at which visibility begins. They walk, an elementary form of this experience of the city. They are walkers, wandersmänner, whose bodies follow the thicks and thins of an urban text. They write without being able to read it. These practitioners make use of spaces that cannot be seen. Their knowledge of them is as blind as that of lovers in each other's arms. The paths that correspond in this intertwining, unrecognized poems in which each body is an element signed by many others, elude legibility. It is as though the practices organizing a bustling city were characterized by their blindness. The networks of these moving, intersecting writings compose a manifold story that has neither author nor spectator, shaped out of fragments of trajectories and alterations of spaces. In relation to representations, it remains daily and indefinitely other. So after walking the city, meeting all these initiatives, it was almost approaching the date that I had to leave, but most especially the date that I would have to show something. Like, why did we pay so much money to bring this stupid Colombian here and walk around the city, not just to enjoy the night markets of Taipei, but to suggest something. So I said, like, okay, whatever, let's say I'm gonna do a tour. So I said, like, I want to do a tour through the center of Taipei, showing my own experience, but also telling some historical facts that they were told about me. And it was about trying to make valuable these things to show them the value that they had, because the people from the rest of Taipei, they had forgotten about the value that there was in this district. So I said, like, by walking and showing my own experience, a bit like what Guy Debord did also, there was this kind of psychogeographic process that is a different process of just like mapping a very normal area. So I did this psychogeographic map. This is what you see on the right, that you folded, and it worked like a passport. So as a passport that you could stamp in the different stops of the process. This also because I saw that everywhere in Taipei, in fact, everywhere in Taiwan, they had stamps. They were addicted to stamps. They really love to like stamp everything. I love also stamps. So I said, like, I'm going to do these stamps of each of the stops that represent something for me in the district, and I'm going to give the people this value. And then after I'm going to do, so we did this, and then they told me like, oh yeah, 150 people signed up. And I was like, but why? I mean, I cannot tell them anything they don't know, or anything more interesting they don't know. But I think it was also the curiosity of having this Colombian guy there, like, speaking about something. So I gave a lecture called Design, the City and the Everyday. And then I took them for a walk, not the 150 people, because it would have been a bit difficult to manage, but I went with 50 of them, with my translator, with not a megaphone, but a microphone and a portable speaker. And I say instrumentalize myself and not the others. This is because in Europe, people make a lot of fun of Asians, Asian tourists. This is a big, stupid generalization to say Asian tourists, but Chinese or Japanese tourists in Europe, because there are always like a lot of people, a big group with the cameras doing like this and with a small flag. And I want to say, I want to put myself in that position. I want to be the stupid tour guide that is with a small flag and leading people, telling them stupid things. I was being the most ridiculous as possible, but dead serious at the same time. So I went around and told them like, when I came to Taipei, I thought that I would not be able to drink coffee, and coffee is very important for me because I thought here you only drink tea. So I was also picking on stupid stereotypes. And then I found out that there was this big tradition of coffee in Taipei, and there was this coffee shop where I went every morning. So I showed them that coffee shop and that stupid story. But I would have loved to see that with a drone, because I mean, it looked so stupid. And like just speaking in English, and then the translator saying like, she probably was saying like, I don't know what this guy is saying, but he's saying just nonsense. I really hope. And then I wanted to do all the process in a kind of open source manual, so I did this manual where you could download the line drawings of the stamps, there was a map of all the Fab Labs in Taipei, so you could know where to go to do the maps. There was also the source files of the passport or the manual, so people could do a similar thing. And there were two organizations that started to appropriate some of the principles of what we did. One was Hidden Taipei, and another was an organization that was working in the revitalization of the district, and that were also doing walks as a way to appropriate space. I'm not going to speak to you about this because it's going to be too long. I'm going to finish with this one. Sorry. I know the people who were controlling my time, they're gone, so we can stay here for, what? Yeah? Another half an hour? No, you must be hungry, I'm too. Another is called Minga for Hasselt. Who here knows what a Minga is? Somebody? What is it? Yeah. So it's an indigenous Latin American practice of communal work. So whenever there is a need to do something, for instance, in the community, they don't organize a minga, because this is like words that we have from also our Western understanding of like you organize and you do a method. No, there is no method. You summon, you don't, but they summon the community, the people, to engage in this communal work. So I was working in this project for this open school that we were organizing in Hasselt in Belgium. And the message for me is open space for other type of practices. So I wanted to use a minga as a way to activate a community around the train station in Hasselt, which was also very run down. And I say, how can we use a minga kind of practice to engage the people in revitalizing the space? So we spoke with the owner of a tagine restaurant, that's a Moroccan food tagine restaurant in front of the station, and she said, like, I would like to offer like the space that I have in front of my restaurant, that it's a public space, but she kind of has right to use it, to build a kind of public space between us, and we can engage people from a youth house around the corner who are youngsters who have like problems in school of drugs or fights or gangs or whatever. And I said like, it's perfect for this kind of setting. So I used the Minga as a way of summoning and gathering people around a shared concern. So I organized the Minga in 3 acts. The first act was basically co-designing. So I made a plan drawing of the area, and you can speak louder so that, yeah, so that the people there. So I did like this plan drawing of the area and of the facade, and then the youngsters could draw their own dreams for this area and so on. Then there was a second act that was building, so it was really going to the place and starting to build what would that terrace, that public space be, and that was also a challenge, as in like technical ways that you have to figure out, like when you have a lot of people, especially youngsters, full of energy that they just want to like start screwing and cutting and so on. You have to have a clear plan and say like, okay, you're gonna be the station that is gonna do the sticks of 30 centimeters. You're gonna do the chair tops and the tabletops of this and this, and then you start organizing people, and then you really can be productive. And at the end of the day, we had this really nice space. Also, we got donated a lot of plants, so it became like a small oasis there around the area. And then, as a third act, I wanted to have a collective cooking and collective dinner. So we did, with this Taiwanese friend that lived there, we did dumplings, or she did dumplings. I love how I appropriate things, and we did when she did it all. But she did dumplings, I ate them. Huh? Yeah, but no, truth being, I didn't do much in the... No, al César lo que es del César. She did most of the cooking. But the idea was to use this space to have this collective dinner. And I'm going to close with what I think for me was one of a very important learning from this project, and that it represents in this quote by Colombian architect Simón Josi. Very interesting reference as well. And I was having an email exchange with him around those days. And we were speaking about a common friend that we had. And he told me the following: I think with Manuel, our common friend, you can move forward in great ways in what you propose to yourselves. He has great talent and a great attitude to confront challenges, even when they exceed the onirical parameters. From my point of view, this is the fundamental aspect when undertaking any process, having in mind that the result of a good dinner with 4 friends does not depend exclusively on the recipe, but on the disposition and the generosity to wash the plates, the dishes. So this for me came very, very well, because at the end of this dinner, we had been working all week long in an open school, sleeping 5 hours a day, and really, really, really hard work. And 2 of my colleagues, I'm always speaking of other people, I was not washing the dishes, but they offered, nevertheless, if they were tired and so on, to wash the dishes. And that was the most important thing. Who had the generosity to wash the dishes? Not to, even do the dumplings or fry them or eat them, but who was going to wash the dishes? So I think I'm going to close there, because otherwise, as I told you, I can speak for another hour. But I think that's a nice message to leave it at. Thank you.
So thank you, Pablo, very much. I think he inspired Camila and Thomas so much that they started a journey to walk around the city to find new studies. So thank you very much. I think we have very small time, but it might be very interesting to have maybe one question, a couple of questions. So anybody want to ask something? You raise your hand? No? Okay. Alejandra.
Have you had a chance to replicate some of those sparkling things in Colombia? Because it all looks wonderful.
No, not yet. I just arrived. Yeah, I mean, I arrived 3 months. 3 months ago, but you. I mean, I think you pointed at a problematic word that is replicate. I wouldn't be interested in replicated. I would be interested in how not necessarily the learnings, or because I think that's also a problem that we have here, is that we always think like, so they say like, ah yeah, Pablo, he just arrived from the Netherlands, and they say like, oh yeah, we heard that they're really good at design. I'm like, yeah, well, depends how you see it. And they say like, oh, you're gonna come to teach us what you learned there. I would like to avoid that kind of colonial heritage and attitude, and more see how can we create things here from scratch. Of course, it's influenced by my learning and my experience, and so maybe I would change the word replicate to transfer, adapt, appropriate. But that's what I would like to do. I mean, I think because everything kind of came together in this last project that I didn't have time to show you, but it's about building and supporting local networks. So I think that's something that is very necessary to do here in Colombia, is to nourish these kind of networks that are starting to form and are starting to emerge and to surface of people that are doing self-organized things in urbanism, in design, in arts and culture in general. And they're not growing as a network, they're emerging as kind of initiatives, but I think it's important to articulate them. So I think that's something that I would like to kind of transfer here, yeah, or work here.
Okay.
Something else?
Thank you.
Right.
So we have something for you also as well as a present. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, very inspiring.